Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of August 8th, 2022. Meeting is being recorded and everybody should be able to hear each other. So if you can't, let us know. I'm going to do a roll call of the Board of Directors.
Just give me a second. We're gonna also let Norma in. She's in the waiting room. She's in twice in our waiting room. What can we do, right? Can we let them both in?
No, because you get that super weird feedback thing.
We'll let her in once and see what happens.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on that's different.
You try her second one.
I did, yeah. I batted them both.
All right.
Do a sound check on Norma.
Norma, can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself and say hello to us?
One says muted, the other one says that she's not.
Norma, if you're able to hear us, we cannot hear you. So I'm not sure what's going on with your connection this time. But if possible, maybe call in instead. Brian, would you like to do the roll call of the remainder of the board while Norma gets sorted out?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, great. Roll call of the board, Brian Noggle,
Here.
Scott Bieber, Dick Bonner,
You're
Norma Cusick, Ted Lyons, Kevin Baker,
Yeah.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Here,
Jeff Morgan,
Here.
Amir Famili. We have 5 board members present. If we can get Norma connected, there'll be 6. So we do. have a
Lisa,
quorum.
am I on now?
Yes, Norma's here.
Okay, yeah, I'm having problems with my Wi-Fi this morning.
All right, we can hear you, so that's good.
Okay. We're on. All right. The board packet was mailed out and also provided electronically to us and is available on the website. So we all should have received that and had time to review it. Let's take a look at the agenda. Any need for any changes, corrections, additions, and also an executive session?
I have no changes for today's agenda and no executive sessions planned.
Okay, fine. Move on then to approval of the minutes from July 25th for the director's meeting.
Make a motion with accept the minutes of July 25th.
second,
Thank you. Okay, motion made and seconded. Any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I,
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to public comments. This is the opportunity for anybody in the public to make any comments on items not related to the agenda.
No, thank you, Brian.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you. Okay, moving on to action discussion items. We have one under finance administration is a discussion. LCA enterprise resource planning, ERP needs assessment and roadmap. And I assume we have a presentation.
We do, and we also have a special guest here today. Doug Spears is on from Raftellus. Doug, am I pronouncing your last name
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Hey, Lisa,
Okay,
how you
cool.
doing?
Doug, it's good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Doug was the principal consultant from Reftelis who helped us through the needs assessment of our enterprise resource planning software, the Munis evaluation. We discussed that briefly at the last meeting as it relates to our strategic plan. And we invited Doug to provide a brief summary of the results of the work that they've done so far and some of the next steps and recommendations. So Doug, I'm going to pull up your presentation and share screen. You can just tell me when to advance. Is that good?
That'd be great. Yes.
Great. Good to see you. This presentation, as well as the next one for the other agenda item, is on our website as well for those who can't see the screen share.
Well, good afternoon. I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there today, but it's a pleasure. We spent last 2 months looking at the Munis Enterprise Resource Planning software. The ERP solution is a major software program for LCA. It touches really every employee within LCA. If you want to advance the screen, I'll go through.
Okay. Get rid of that chat box.
So the stated goal on the right-hand side up on the top is kind of the flow chart of what we did. The stated project goal really was to perform a baseline assessment of the current practices at LCA with the use of the ERP solution and the functionality of the current Munis ERP. Really determine where LCA, the vision of what's working well, what's not working well, where does the organization want to go? And we'll talk about the strengths and the weaknesses, what we found in the foundation stage. Then we'll talk about the vision of where LCA wishes to proceed. And then our last deliverable to close out the project was a roadmap, implementation roadmap. That was delivered about a week ago. It's still in draft phase. We wanted to go through this board meeting and then finalize it with any comments or other needs. If you can pound down. So we found a lot of the strengths as we did the SWOT workshop, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. During our interviews, we interviewed about 25 people within LCA over 13 interview periods. So we got to talk to a lot of the people and the core power users. We didn't obviously get to talk to everyone, but it was a well-represented group of people. The strengths, as kind of showed here, a lot of the modules are working well for the bullets 1 and 2, and the employees that are working with those modules that are working well complete their work, like the use of the tool. They know the tool well, so they're very confident with it. LCA has been trying to upgrade from the legacy version 11.3 to an updated version of 2021.2. They've been trying to do that for over a period of about a year. Some of the hiccups were technical issues with interfaces, but the upgrade now seems to be going forward, and it's additional functionality. So you have better software interfaces. You can do the 2-factor authentication, which will help eliminate some of the customer refund payments. And you can get enhanced reporting because of the APIs and others. Over the years, so LCA implemented Munis back in 2008. The major upgrade was back in 2013 with the addition of the city of Allentown. Since then, LCA has successfully interfaced the Munis product to the CityWorks CMMS, and that's a computerized maintenance management system. So you have the service orders from the customer side going to the maintenance work order side on the maintenance side, and then back. So that's connected now and is working well. The IT group, Chris and others, have made significant server investments, so your infrastructure is good. Also, others have been updating the SOPs along with customer service, so that's good. And you're participating in the Munis users group to identify new functions and features, etc. So those are the strengths we found with the use of Munis. Liesl, then we'll go to the opportunities and weaknesses. So as we looked at the setup of Munis, and I know the board wants reports, one of the things we've heard consistently is board needs reports, board needs reports. One of the problems is the original setup of the system and the general ledger and chart of accounts were by service area and funds back in 2008, 2007, 2008. And there's no department string or code in that GL. So the inherent problem is the accounting does not go by department, and that goes to budgets. It goes to looking at cost of service, looking at where the overruns may be or who's underperforming. Without the department codes in the GL string, it's painful. There's a lot of manual manipulation to get the data out. So this setup, this original setup in 2008 is really a root cause of several other challenges, and we'll talk about those. The other thing we saw is the enterprise resource planning is a lot of modules. It has the financial, the utility billing. It also has project accounting, HR, timekeeping, citizen self-service, inventory, treasury, contract, and incident management. For several reasons over the years, some of the functionality of these tools were not up to par. LCA looked at them at the time, decided to pass on them, do workarounds or other systems, processes. Now, since this is an ERP system, many of these modules have been improved over the years, and LCA should look at using some of these, and we'll talk about those as we go through the improvements. What we looked at is LCA still has a manual timekeeping process. They're putting it in Excel-based timekeeping because they don't have the timekeeping module, and then they have to re-enter the data. As we talked about the reports are difficult just because of the way it's set up. If we change the GL string, the reports will be at a push of a button. One of the biggest issues we saw was the materials management of just the processes of receiving materials, using materials, and then writing them off the book. So that can be improved with the upgrade of the ERP. And then there's a lot of current processes, some of them that we identified, some quick wins, and we'll talk about those, just some current processes. Some are ACH payments. You're still issuing paper checks. You have some ACH payments, but that's an easy flip of the switch to make them all ACH payments, or at least over 90%. And then what we saw, and one of the pain points was just the lack of support from Munis. That's why it's so important to be part of the Munis user group. And the project manager of Munis and just the Munis ticket support with this upgrade that we saw is painful. So that's something we need to improve. Any questions on the strengths and weaknesses before I move on to kind of the goal and implementation plan? If not, we'll move forward. Thank you. So in the vision, LCA has several improvements. One we talked about is the upgrade to Munis 2021.2 as soon as practical. So that's an in-kind upgrade. That's taking the same GL string, same business processes, upgrading it to a current version so you can get the additional functionality that's been embedded. The goal is to eliminate the manual and duplicate processes, simplify timekeeping, really get a handle on purchasing and materials management. The customer experience and the employee experience, getting modern technology and all of the modules, the HR, the timekeeping, the project accounting. The integration comes with a new system. Collections process can be simplified with the two-factor authentication and others. And then reporting, if we get the new GL string, chart of accounts, again, reporting to the board by department, by service, by fund, all three, and it can be done by a push of a button. So that's the vision kind of in this middle step here. So let's talk about the roadmap. So there were three possible solution alternatives we talked about. The first one is remain as is, kind of the do nothing or at least upgrade to the 2021.2 that we talked about, get that functionality. And then as you go along, kind of optimize processes. Number two is reconfigure and re-implement with the new modules, really go back, change the GL string, update the chart of accounts, reduce the time codes and activity cost tracking codes, re-implement Munis is number two. And then number 3 was replace Munis. Go out, look for an RFP, go out for other ERP solutions, see what's out in the marketplace, look at Munis competitors, and make a decision there. And doing the assessment, talking to the staff, looking at best practices. If you can hit the button, Lisa. It's option number 2 that's really the best choice. Number 1 has issues. You will continue lingering this chart of accounts for the next 10, 20 years or until you get rid of Munis. So you don't want to do that. It's painful and there's workarounds because of some of the other issues. They replace LCA number 3. That just causes new issues. All software has issues. That would add a year to the RFP, would cost you additional license costs. You would switch out all of your work processes. You'd have to train all your people again. So that's prohibited with really no added value. Number 2 is really the right choice. Munis is a tried and true system. It has many of the modules you're not using, but added flexibility and added functionality. Reconfiguring it gets you that base code, the base GL to build upon. During that re-implementation, you can put in your new business processes, you can put in HR, you can put in timekeeping, you can put in project accounting. So you can bring these modules in a planned programmatic implementation of the software. That would be then the training, the testing, and really getting the users, power users that are needed. So our recommendation out of the 3 alternatives was to stay with Munis ERP, optimize the functionality through the reconfiguration, and then deployment of the additional modules and use those modules well. If you want to click the button. So the new modules, as we talked about, there's several of them, and they're all very powerful. What we propose is LCA start looking at these modules, look at the current functionality. Munis can give demos, so we recommend doing 1 hour, an hour and a half demos over a series of weeks, and look at the power of HR, the power of timekeeping, project accounting, et cetera. These additional modules will fill out your enterprise resource plan software and add a lot more functionality than what you have now. It eliminates, so that goal of eliminating spreadsheets and sticky notes and phone calls and emails, what we want is everything in one system. The reason for an ERP solution is everything's embedded in one. You have access to all the data. It's transparent. You have streamlined business processes, all your system interfaces, and it makes work and life a lot easier. If you click down, that takes time, resources, some money. So we put this timeline in. This is a moderately aggressive timeline. We don't want it too short and we don't want it too long to become a hobby. So it needs to be a programmatic. This, again, this touches with your timekeeping and payroll and HR. This touches every employee within LCA. So there's a set of quick wins we identified. For example, the ACH payments and a couple other things that are pretty easy, check receiving. There's planning changes to go back through the general ledger, chart of accounts, time codes, project codes, look at your rates, look at really what you're doing, back up and understand, why do we have all these codes? Why do we have all this delineation? What do we really need for reporting? What data do we need for analysis? And you don't want to track too far down because you get lost in the weeds and you can't really get the data you need to manage the business. Then you need a new vendor contract. The vendor Munis would be a new scope of work because they have data conversion, testing, training. So it's getting a scope of work to the vendor. And then the project kickoff, we're thinking probably early January, maybe February. It's about a 9-month implementation. You can see the major activities here with discovery, data conversion, testing, training. So the go live would be from 9 to 12 months out. Again, we don't want it too short. We don't want it too long. It needs to be kind of somewhat uncomfortable, but not a hobby, if that makes sense. Also, we recommend for this, we'll recommend some backfilling of resources. for this reimplementation. This software will be around for the next 15 years, and we need to do it right. So what we recommend is to backfill from 3 to 6 positions with temporary employees. What we do is, what we recommend always is take some of the core power users, sequester them for the 9 to 12 month implementation, where their primary job is this ERP implementation. You hire temporary employees and then you raise the rest of the staff up one level. That provides cross-training in case your other people leave or get sick or win the lottery. And it provides the best people for the implementation for the job. They need it for understanding what are the business processes, what are the data, what reports do we need, what is the organizational change management to get our people on board. And then there's typically at the end, if you see number 11, there's typically post-live support. The project is never over after go live. There's always optimization, data issues, more reports, additional user training, those processes, those kinds of things. With that, I think that wraps it up. So that's we did a current state assessment report. We did an implementation plan. After this, if there's not any comments or any other staff comments on the 2 deliverables, we'll finalize those this week and get them to Liesl. Any questions?
Remember questions?
Hey guys, this is Jeff. I just one question, and maybe it's more for Liesl. As far as the temporary hiring, is that something that's practical? Are there people that are going to be involved that have multiple responsibilities? How would that work out?
Yeah, so I was going to mention, and thanks for the lead in, Jeff. At our last meeting, I shared a cost overview. Doug, I don't know if I told you that I had shared with the board that we're expecting the total project to be in the $1.5 million range. And part of that 1.5 is a cushion for doing some temporary staffing. We've been meeting internally about who will be involved and what the core team will look like on the implementation. And we think that there is some potential for some backfilling of, front office and back office duties, like some light accounting or frontline customer service, answering calls, handling mail, those kinds of tasks that we can hire temp staffing for, as those folks are kind of working up a little bit and allowing our top users to be on that core team. So I think there's some room to do that and some practicality to that. We haven't quite worked out all the details. Is it 6 people? Is it 4?
Right. But it's important, and that's a great question. It's important just because if the team is not dedicated and don't go to all of the meetings, then decisions are made or decisions are not made, and it becomes problematic down the road. So again, resources, we know for most utilities are probably the hardest thing to get. And that's why we try to mention it pretty early on the discussions of what best practices are and how these things are successful.
Great, thank you.
I have a question, Doug. Are we talking about off-the-shelf packages for each of the components, or are we talking about any kind of adjustments that we would make to make it fit our organization?
Now, these are all the commercial off-the-shelf modules that aren't currently used now. Right now, you have workarounds, whether it's paper, spreadsheets, other things like that. These modules are part of the ERP suite of Munis, so it's all COTS off-the-shelf product. They're already integrated, and again, between now and January, February, LCA can start doing additional due diligence in looking at the functionality of those modules. And then any concerns that people have, going from a paper timesheet to electronic timesheet, things like that. There's some business processes that need to be worked out. You have union employees, you have the city of Allentown, you have time clocks. There's some business processes that need to be worked out. But it's all COTS off-the-shelf integrated solution under the single Munis umbrella.
Just a little bit more on that, this Brian. The existing systems that we are using, have we made software modifications to those, or are they off the shelf?
We haven't looked at the detailed customizations. What I hear, there's some customizations. I don't think there's a lot. Chris would know better than I would of those customizations, but those would go away with the new upgrade, and the upgrade would probably be in the cloud. So you don't have customizations in the cloud.
So ultimately, all of our customizations are on the setup in the back end, the GL codes and the way we set up our accounts. There's no custom interfaces, so to speak. So all of that is kind of out of the box. But all the back end stuff that affects Chuck and Ed and Ed's team with reporting and everything we want to get out of the system is where all of our real wiggly kind of customization was done initially, which is ultimately, as Doug mentioned, causing all of our issues right now.
Good. All right. Thank you. Any other board questions? Any questions?
I'd just like to make a comment on timing. Doug's last slide showed the schedule. And he says it's moderately aggressive. I think some of us are feeling it's closer to aggressive. But most specifically, I wanted to call out that the first block says we're starting in August, and it's August 8th already. So we're probably already a month or so behind Doug's schedule, because we're going to need to authorize the next phase of work. Doug's or Raftelis's engagement kind of ends with the delivery of the final report that he just gave in summary today. So we'll have another authorization of additional work in a bit.
Yeah, we try to keep it, we want to keep the momentum going. The staff have been through, 2 months of interviews, and it's been good. We had a lot of face-to-face, a lot of active participation by staff. Staff seem very excited about getting this going. So the schedule, as I said, is moderately aggressive or aggressive. I agree. And it takes some time. It'll take what it takes. The vendor will actually lay out the implementation schedule. So this is a planning level kind of view of it. But there'll be the Munis implementation team will have a detailed implementation schedule based on the modules and the size of LCA. But this is our best guess. But yeah, I agree. We don't want to push it out. We don't want a large gap in between because the momentum is very important for change management.
The other comment I wanted to make on schedule is in that initial phase of planning, where we have the core team looking at current business process, and before we really get into the implementation piece, that might be a good opportunity for us to workshop with the board a little bit about the reports you currently receive and what you want to receive in the future, just to make sure that we're really thinking about the needs of the organization holistically.
As far as finances goes, budget, and also is it come in one big slug where we have to outlay the majority of the money at one point in time, or is it straight lined pretty much over the total duration of the project?
My guess would be over the duration of the project.
But it's still just a one-year project, so.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's only a 12-month project. So, I mean, if you're looking at an annual period, it's all going to go out 1 year.
How about licensing costs in the future beyond this?
The licensing, you're already paying most of those license fees. You're not using some of them. It's not that much. It's probably, I thought it was $12,000 a year or something. So you don't really have a big license cost for that upgrade. And the payments for Munis will probably be lump sum over the 12-month or 9-month period, in milestone payments every month, typically.
One of the reasons we wanted to shoot for this project to be done now is so that we can incorporate the recommendations into our 2023 budget, which we'll be presenting some assumptions to you in early September. So some of what you are hearing about with this project, here again, when we do that.
Okay, thanks. I think it's a very important project that we sorely need. So I think that it's going to take a lot of effort.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, we do not have any items under water. We do have a wastewater item, KISS system modeling 2021 model expansion and calibration and discussion.
Phil, do you want to introduce your guest speaker?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Everyone knows who Jim is. This will be Jim's third time going over this presentation. Brian, for your sake, July 5th and July 7th, some of the KISS representatives were at both of those meetings, so they've heard this already. So again, this will be the third time. And Alex is next to me. She's on Jim's team. You're the lead modeler, as you would say, right?
It's good, Sam.
So I'll turn over to Jim.
Okay, thank you. A version of this, or part of this, we presented 2 years ago, right before, I guess, right before pandemic kicked in. So the first few slides may look familiar as we lay out what this is, but you're aware that we did the flow monitoring work, and I presented the results of the I&I evaluations that we did on the data that came from that. You'll recollect that I said the primary purpose, though, of those 100 flow meters that we had in the system were to build a new model that could be used for planning and engineering purposes through the Act 537 process. This model is an expansion of the old models. If you'll recollect, we had the Western Lehigh model, we had the Whitman-Reckfart City model, both of which were built about 12 years ago, that we bolted together in 2014 and used as kind of a Frankenstein model to get through the AO portions of our issues. This model takes that and expands out and now models all of the sewers that are collected and flow through Klein's Island. So it's not just LCA in the city now, it's Emmaus, Salisbury, Copley, Whitehall, South Whitehall, and Hanover systems are also included in this new model. So I want to go through most of these topics at a high level, talk about what it is, what we use it for. I'm not going to talk about the steps of modeling. It's exactly the same thing I talked to you about 2 years ago, so I'm not going to replow that earth. I do want to go over where this model is strong, where this model is weak, what are the things we're doing with it, and what are the future modeling efforts that we'll be using this tool for. So first, quickly, what is a dynamic hydraulic sewer model? So you may have heard the term a digital twin. A model is exactly that. It's a digital twin, and it really looks at what is actually out in the real world, and it puts it into a mathematical model. And it susses off into two basic categories. One are physical attributes. How big is the pipe? What slope is it? What are the materials? How deep is it? Where does it come together? Where does it split apart? Where do new connections come in? The other part of it is what goes through the pipe. So you see in this upper corner, the actual sewage flow. And you heard the discussion during the RDII. In some places, the actual amount of sewage going through the pipe is a relatively small percentage of what's actually going through these sewage pipes. Thanks to a robust economy in our area, we've got a big portion of the flows that go through to Klein's Island are coming from industrial and commercial users. But then everything else we have on the bottom are the things that in an ideal world wouldn't be in the pipes. That's groundwater, that's illegal rainwater connections, streams, percolating rainwater, baseline groundwater leaking into the system 365 days a year. And in the Klein's Island system, the leakage accounts for somewhere in the neighborhood of a third to half the leakage that we see in the system. And of course, when it rains, the flows go up markedly higher. And for a separate sewer system like ours, that's where the engineering and the technical expertise and the difficulty come. It's very easy to model that actual sewage flow, the dry weather flow. Modeling the wet weather flows is very different, very difficult to do. And it's largely related to the things I related when I went through the rainfall analysis that we did for how that impacts the system. You know, the wetter it is, the more rain there is, the more flow that comes through the pipe. Getting the relationship between how much rain happened and how much gets in is the challenge through all of this. So it's a digital twin. Go to the next slide, please. So what do we use this for? The model is used for really two key things. The first piece is, how is it currently performing? So it's used to say, how much flow is going through the pipes? How much flow should go through there at 10 o'clock in the morning? How much should go through at 2 o'clock in the morning? What happens? Where do we have flow restrictions because the pipes just aren't big enough? Where the end says, where do we have plenty of capacity? It also points us to things like, where are we likely to have overflows that maybe we don't know about? As well as, where does the model indicate leakage is coming in as well? So that current performance is really a function of the base load of sewage and then the impacts of rainfall that it has. And in the end, we can answer questions about what our current situation is that really susses off to how big of a rain event can we handle right now? How often does that happen? What does that give us from a reliability standpoint? The real power of a model, of a digital twin, is being able to predict things that are going to happen in the future, what impacts they're going to have on the sewer system. So the system's perfectly fine now. Think of it like a car. We were talking about cars ahead of time, right? Can you add another kid and set them on the transmission hump or not, right? Probably not. Sewer system's kind of the same way. If we add more flow, what's going to happen to that flow? Where is it going to go? This is really important in an area like ours that is experiencing and is planned to experience and is expected to experience such robust new development that's taking place here. A lot of this, especially in our portion of the system, is about taking farms and converting that to houses and warehouses. But some of it's also redevelopment. We saw just in the last couple of years, Kraft go out of business, and Caring come in and completely change the nature of what's coming through. It's also got the ability to add service areas sooner or later. As an example, South Whitehall is probably not in our current planning window, but probably going to extend over Huckleberry Ridge. Where's that flow going to go? This tool gives us the ability to look at that. The other thing it lets us do is look at what happens to the pipes as they age, right? Everything that ages, sewer pipes that age tend to leak more. So the characteristics of the leakage change. It also allows us to evaluate what happens if we get aggressive about water conservation as well. So these are all really good tools for evaluating what happens if we change what we put into the sewer system. Once you know those things, either you've got a current problem or you're identifying that you have a future problem. The model is an engineering tool for helping you to evaluate, how do I fix that? So I've defined a problem. My objectives, of course, are to keep the sewage in the pipe and get it to where it's supposed to go. So how do I do that most cost effectively? So it lets us look at things like, well, what happens if we reduce I&I, that leakage that's coming in? Does that solve our problem? What happens if we make a bigger pipe? What does that do to us? And you've got all the things that are listed there. It's really about finding what's the right balance between all the different things you can do in the system to solve the current problem, as well as your future problems. Another nice thing about this is you may have a planning horizon that's only 50 years, but nothing we build, 15 years, nothing we build do we expect to last for just 15 years, right? You don't want to build a new pipe next to the old pipe every 15 years. So it lets us step into the future as far as we're comfortable prognosticating what could happen there and size things right so that we're not constantly realizing we need to buy a new car because we had another kid, if you will. So big questions about why we spent the money to build the model. The model's built now. Okay, it's important, like any tool, like any car you might buy, it's got certain positives and certain negatives. And of course, our job is to try to engineer in as many positives, as many strengths, and to reduce the weaknesses, but the nature of this work isn't, that's not always possible to do perfectly. It's important that you understand what those limitations are. So I do want to say that the tool that we have now is a gigantic upgrade to what we had with the 2014 Frankenstein monster, where we bolted the two engineering firms' models together. The current model across the entire area, crosses the entire area, so it now goes all the way up to Egypt, goes all the way out into South Whitehall. It accurately characterizes all the different connections from Salisbury to Emmaus. In addition to that, it has what we call a groundwater module. The city's model before was a basic non-dynamic model. So it was really good at dry weather flow, but on the rainfall, you could calibrate it to the rainfall event, but it didn't take into account what happens as the groundwater comes up and down. And that has a giant impact on how much flow comes through the system. We now have a groundwater module across the entire system. So as we run into years like 2018 and 2019, and then come back down to normal years like we have now, the model does a good job of predicting over time how the system responds. So our confidence level right now for the entire KISS model is quite high. It's not 100%, but it is quite high. Talk about some of the strengths. So as we go through and we calibrate the model, what we physically do is we take that flow meter data that we have and we program in all the different variables that go into the model. Slope, diameter, turns, friction losses, how the rainfall percolates down and in there. And then we compare it against the rainfall data, the flow data that happens, dry weather and wet weather. And we try to make sure that the two lines overlap with each other as close as we can. So we had in 2021 an excellent set of data for calibrating the model. So that's usually the biggest caveat that folks put around this. We had a long period of time. We had quite a few good rain events over a variety of groundwater conditions that allowed us to really tweak the model's module so that they work really well. So that's one of our great strengths. We also talked about how we QA/QC'd the model. So we're not building this model. We did not build this model with any suspect data. Any data that was suspect were thrown out and weren't used. So the data that are used to calibrate it are highly scrutinized, and we have really good correlations against this. The majority of the data that we have for calibrating this was in 5-minute increments. Also very key to getting a good model generation. Our knowledge of the system and how it operates is markedly, well, it's hugely higher than it was in 2009. And it's even higher than what we had even in 2014 and 2019, specific to the parts that aren't the Western Lehigh. We've always had a good understanding of our pipes, but now we have a fairly sophisticated understanding of the city's portion of it, as well as Copley, Whitehall's, Emmaus's, Salisbury's, and South Whitehall to the extent of the near end connections, not out in the South Whitehall. And because of that, a lot of the things that we weren't able to explain before and model properly, we've been able to do that. We're finally able to reconcile. We've never had a model that took where the Allentown, Emmaus, and Little Lehigh relief interceptors come in with Cedar Creek, the Cedar Creek relief lines, and turn into the Little Lehigh just upstream of the water plant, near the hump, what do we call the hump bridge, right at MLK. Never would balance out right. We finally got it where it needs to be, again, because of our understanding. We also, in terms of the industrial flows, this time around, we gathered all of the industrial flow users that had them actual flow data rather than estimating it on a general quarter. So that's much more accurate as well. And then finally, we recognize that the sewers that are down in the stream beds and in the floodplains perform differently than the others. And so we actually put those into the model as their own catchments, so we can look at those directly as well. So again, we couldn't do that without actually knowing where they are. in the end, what it really comes down to is how does the flow meter data look compared to the wet weather data? Now we have 100 of these types of things. I'm going to show you all 100. I'm going to show you just the one. So this is Klein's Island. This is the end of the line. Quite frankly, it's very easy to get a calibration at Briningsville at the top of the system, end of the line. Much harder to get all of these to balance out as they come out. So Klein's Island is really the proof of the pudding. And actually, when Alex showed this to me, I thought she was faking the data because it looks so good. The red line, if you can discern it, is actually Klein's Island's differential pressure meter. Right, that's the actual high-end meter that we've got at the plant. And the blue is what the model says. So these are dry weeks. You're looking at 2 different dry weeks that we look, and you can see on the bottom ones, the peak flow and the volume numbers for these 2 weeks match up really nicely tight, 10% tolerances. More importantly, when you look at the top one, the red versus the blue, they overlap very nicely. It's highly unusual at the end of a system that's almost 1,000 miles to get that kind of overlap. So just excellent job there. Next slide, please. It's just another dry week that we had. The real challenge, as I said, is in the wet weather pieces of it. And in the wet weather, we've got almost as good storm calibration. So we had a number of significant events. This is the June 11th event. Again, red is actual, blue is what the model shows. And just go back for 1 second. You might look at the chatter of the blue there and go, well, why is the model bouncing like that? But in reality, the flow to the treatment plant was much more smooth. Those are things that the model, so that's the difference between real world and the model, right? So there's some differences there. The model has in it certain logic around, well, what would happen at the pumps at the treatment plant? When does the auxiliary pump station kick on? What happens at Park Pump Station in terms of when that turns on? So the model anticipates certain things that maybe manually get overridden and dampened out. And so that's why that looks like that. It's still, when you look at the volume and the peak flow graphs at the bottom, excellent matches for this storm, which was quite a large event. You've got the 2 storms that were back to back in August. Now, back to back events are really hard to model unless you've got a really high performing groundwater module. That's that piece we added in. So you've got the storm on the 19th, and then 2 days later, it's really a 3-inch storm and a 3-inch storm separated by just 2 days, 2.5 days. And the groundwater module matches it beautifully. Go ahead, one more. The one that I never thought we would get to match was Hurricane Ida. That's the one on 9-1 to Klein's Island. You can see it matches very nicely. Now, it happens to match very nicely because it completely flatlines across the capacity of the treatment plant. What's missing from here is the next phase of the work of where are all the places and how much sewage came out of the pipes during the course of this event. But the bottom line is this one example of Klein's Island's wet and dry is a real testament to the quality of the modeling tool that we have. So let's talk about the warts, right? Because it's not a perfect tool. You'll recall when we built the Western Lehigh sewer portion of this 2 years ago, we had issues around the pre-treatment plant because of the industrial flow patterns. Now, what you're seeing now is a normal diurnal pattern. Diurnal means daily pattern. And typically you're going to get a pattern that's either 2-toothed or 1-toothed, depending on what day of the week it is. And it relates to what we do when we get up in the morning. We get up, go to the bathroom, we flush, we get a shower, go away for a while, we come back at dinner time, it goes up. It's a repeatable pattern. You can tell actually in the city where the blue collar regions are, because they don't have a morning peak. Their peak is at the end of the day when the blue collar staff come home and wash up. You can tell the white collar areas because it's higher in the morning. All the guys that are going to put on ties, shower before they go to work. We don't have that in we don't have that in the industrial areas. What we have is what looks like a really bad EKG day. The flows are all over the place. And this is Upper Iron Run, which has in it not just Applewood, and not just the hotel area, but it's also got Boston Beer and Nestle. And Boston Beer being the biggest one, but Nestle's got 3 or 4 different plants that are all discharging at different times. So the flows go up and down, up and down. This is an example. We've got this in a number of places in the city. There's a chemical plant in the city. There's a brewery in the city. We've got it in Emmaus with the Cintas laundry facility. Makes it really difficult to govern, to judge what we're going to do. So where we have this, we cannot get a 15-minute by 15-minute matching because it's complete chaos. You just never know when Boston Beer is going to discharge or Cintas is going to discharge. So what we've done, and that's the blue line you see, is we've taken the average of all the data points and averaged it out. So the blue line on this side is actually much less erratic. It's in no way real, right? In real, the red is real. It's up and down, up and down. So what you get is the flow rates going to the pre-treatment plant can be as much as 2 mgd at any point in time higher or 2 mgd lower. This becomes really important as you start to look at the upper iron run trunk line, the FEB and the pre-treatment plant, because 2 million gallons difference can make a big difference in how much head is stored in the pipe. So that's a weakness. Operating logic was a giant problem for us. We have for the FEB, the pre-treatment plant, Spring Creek Park and Client's Island, pump stations and tanks, a logic that says when this happens, this pump kicks on. When the level goes to this pump kicks on. When the level goes higher, the pump ramps up. All things that in a automated system make perfect sense. And the model is an automated system. Our operation is nothing automated, right? The pre-treatment plant, they decide to turn pumps on and off. They decide to fill the pre-treatment plant at one rate, maybe different than what we have. They maybe don't empty it on the day we thought they were going to empty it. Maybe it's 2 weeks later. We have that same thing that cascades all the way down through Park Pump Station, Spring Creek Pump Station, even all the way to Client's Island. So we will get some erratic behavior that's strictly related to manually operated systems. It doesn't follow that optimized real-time control logic. Obviously, we want to try to get our systems so that they can do that, be optimized. The other thing that the model does not do well is handle stream flooding. Now, I told you that one of the benefits to the new model is we modeled the floodplains as their separate catchments. And for those purposes, it does an excellent job of recognizing that those pipes leak more. What it doesn't do is tell me what happens when the stream floods and it's suddenly pouring in through the tops of manholes. So you've got 2 different hydrographs here, and you can see the red is what actually happened. It's got nothing to do with the leakage through the ground. The rain ended. Sometimes the stream doesn't crest until hours after the rain has ended. You can see that in these 2 instances, these 2 meters where rain is over and it comes up. And that's strictly because the stream flooded. They found the manhole that leaked in through the top and the stream just poured into the sewer. The model does not handle that well at all. It's too chaotic. You could model it. It would be the cost of the space program, right? It's that kind of level of modeling that would need to go into. It's not appropriate. It's important that the board understands that once we start getting to the 5-year events and the 10-year events, so Ida, if you remember the storm from September 1st of a year ago, it was about a 5-year event. The streams are flooding and the model isn't accurately predicting that. It's under predicting how much flow is actually trying to get to Client's Island. Now, the solution for that is not a lot of expensive modeling. The solution for that is a lot of cheap manhole sealing, but it's clearly not been done yet. So that's one of our goals. Improvements. The LCA wet flows and dry flows to the city interceptors are finally really nicely matched. Park pump stations split between what gets pumped, the force main, and what goes down the Little Lehigh for the first time as an accurate balance. Spring Creek pump station split between its force main and the Western Lehigh is pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good. Where the South Whitehall flow comes in to Cedar Crest Park, just to the west of the Rose Garden. It comes into a splitter box and then splits out. That's been defined accurately for the first time. And then where all of the flows come together, the Allentown Emmaus 30-inch line, Cedar Crest 30, Cedar Crest Relief 36, and all try to pound through that 130-inch pipe going in behind the pretreatment plant. We've got those hydraulics really done. Model we've got now is a giant improvement over the 2009 model. It also does a pretty good job of handling what we've been calling the new normal. That was the 2018, 2019 period where you're going to get months of a lot of rain or months of a lot of dry. And as I said, it's really well calibrated to the 10-year events, except in those portions that are running next to the river that go underneath the river, go underneath water. So, any questions about the model strengths and weaknesses?
I don't have any specific question, but as a resident of Allentown, a few years ago, they put a tax on us for stormwater improvements. Does that have any help for you people in your analysis and so forth?
I mean, the stormwater system in Allentown is completely physically separate from,
What?
it's physically separate from the sewer system. So
But it helps.
if stormwater is managed more effectively in some areas, it could have some nominal impact, but not a real specific impact that I think we've measured.
Yeah, I will say, in the city specifically, but everywhere, but the city specifically, we do have, I was talking about the manholes that are in the stream. The manholes that are in the street, when it rains hard, you see the sheet flow going across the parking lot. Everywhere there's a manhole, that's not watertight, that water will go in. To a surprising degree, how much water goes in. In the city, it's made worse in that there are an awful lot of sanitary sewer manhole covers. They're actually storm sewer manhole covers. They've got a dozen holes in them, right? So it just doesn't have to squeeze its way in, it goes right in. So I suspect that the sanitary side would love some money to come over from the storm sewer side to get rid of those storm sewer covers to do that, but I don't think there's any mechanism for that in place right now. Okay, let's talk about what are the things we're doing with this model now that it's calibrated. This calibration was completed. What is it? May. So we didn't waste any time in putting this thing to work. So the first and one of the most important things we're going to use is we're going to confirm the sizing of the interim pumping station. I don't know if you guys are calling it something different.
Upper Western Lehigh Interceptor Pump Station.
So, we had used the 2019 model, the interim model for sizing that. We want to confirm sizing, so that'll be one of the first engineering tasks. The other thing, and we've just completed this, is to do a design storm evaluation. This model that we have, given the computing power we have nowadays, you can run this digital twin on an extended simulation. If you've got the rainfall data, you can run it as long as you want. So if I have a 36-inch pipe and I want to see what happens if I put a 42-inch pipe in over the full, let's say, 20-year period, I can do that. It's just takes a while to get the answer back. Right? It's about a 3 or 4 day model run to get that back. So to cut costs and to cut time on the alternatives analysis for 537 work, we're picking surrogates for recurrence events. We've always called them design storms, but they're really recurrence events. And we're looking at we wanted to look at 3, 5, and 10 and 20-year events. Let us see what impact these types of things have. To do that, we ran the existing model with 22 years worth of rainfall data from the Allentown Airport, which is in 15 minutes or 1 hour, I forget. 1 hour. So we've got a really good data set to run that through and see what kind of impacts we have, and then rank all the major storm events from January 1, 2000 until December 31st, 2021. What did those 22 years give us? And we've done that. What you're seeing on the screen now, at the top is rainfall, right? So this is how much rain landed every single year. And you may be aware that in this area, 40 inches is about a normal year. And we hit that button a couple of times. So that kind of gives you the 40-year period. What we can see, I'm sorry, down below, the green is the number of overflow locations where during that year we had an overflow. And the tan is the volume in millions of gallons that came out in any given year. And so you can see 2012 to 2015, while we were negotiating with the feds, was a particularly dry year, dry set of years. We didn't have much overflow. 2018 and 2019 were higher than normal flows. Anytime we get to those higher than normal flow situations is when we start to see overflows. Another short way of saying this is our system does really well when the sun is out. Not so well when it rains several times in a row. And so the data set all the way on the right-hand side, you can see is 2012, sorry, 2021, 40 inches, 42 inches is about normal. It was a dead normal year. 2021 was a dead normal year. The only good thing it had going for it was we had a wet August and September, gave us good responses that gave us some idea of how things would be when the clouds really start to darken up. So this is the model run. This tells us what comes out of each of these. Go ahead and hit that thing. And what's interesting is what these data tell us in terms of the storm events that we had. Now, the feds through NOAA, that's the North, tell me what that is. Oceanic atmosphere and something or other. The rainfall people at the federal level have for decades now have issued what we call IDF curves, intensity, duration, frequency. So how much rain is coming down for what period of time? How often is that likely to happen? So you'll hear us talk about a 1-year event, a 2-year event, 10-year event. Well, that also depends. Is it a 10-year, 24-hour event, or is it a 10-year, 2-minute event, right? So those things really come into play. If you look at it, most of the time in the sanitary side of the business, not the storm side, we're looking at a 24-hour event. And you can see a 1-year, just to give you an idea, 2.5 inches is supposed to happen about once a year, 3 inch every other year. 4-inch event should happen about every 5 years. A 10-year event should be about 4.5 inches. What we found in this data set, this is just straight from the airport, no model, straight from the airport. We've got 2 storms greater than 8 inches, 7 storms greater than 5 inches, 22 storms greater than the 2-year events. So that's twice as many 2-year events as you would expect in this period, and 34 storms greater than the 1-year event. So we're starting to see the impact of climate change. We're starting to see the impact of the changing intensity of the storms. Go back one slide for me. You'll notice that we're not seeing the entire blue line coming down. It's not that we're seeing more rain generally over a year period. It's that when it comes down cats and dogs. And it's coming down more frequently. Go ahead. Go to the next slide. So that table that I showed you on the previous slide is what they call NOAA Atlas 14. You get online and Google it and see. So we've got 11 storms in this period alone that are greater than a 10-year storm event. So for a 22-year period, we have 11 storms that could be characterized as a 10-year event. 15 storms, again in this 22-year period, that would be characterized more than a 5-year event. Right? So some pretty significant things going on. Go ahead.
Jim, one of your comments has been that Atlas 14 data is being updated eventually, and
Yeah,
it's all by a factor of 2.
Yeah, I think most, well, the scientists have clearly understood that changing weather patterns is changing the IDF curves. And so some states like New York are out ahead. They've got Cornell doing their own. NOAA will follow behind this. I think you've got to get into a political environment where there's not as much climate denial going on. Long enough that they can actually get in and do that, publish those standards without running afoul of politics. Bottom line is these are real data, right? So all I'm doing is comparing it against an antiquated benchmark. For our purposes, it doesn't really matter because the rain is the rain is the rain. And so these are what we're dealing with. And so go ahead to the next slide. When we take those rainfall events and we run it through that model, through that 22 years, we can characterize what it does to the system based on this modeling tool that we have. And in the end, that's what this group is concerned with. That's our problem definition, right? What rain event causes the system to go boom and come out? And how much is that? When we look at these events and rank them, we look at kind of three. There's a bunch of different ways of looking at a storm's impact on the sewer. We picked big three. So how many manholes overflow? How much volume came out of those locations? And if I captured all that and set it to Klein's Island, what would that peak flow rate be during that time period? Right? This is assuming our system has no improvements. And so you can see on the left-hand side, the storms that are there. Most of those names should look familiar. If you've been living here for the last 20 years, you'll certainly remember Ivan. I certainly do. You certainly remember Ida. It just happened. As we look at the recurrence frequencies of these, we did some statistical analysis. So Tammy from 2005 was just an outlier, right? It didn't even make a good 20-year event. So you remember at the top of this, I said we would like to get a 3, 5, 10, and 20-year event. Tammy's like a 50-year event. We don't have a good 20-year event in the last 22 years. What we do have is for this really 3 solid events that we think qualify as potential 10-year events, 2 or 3 that we think are good 5-year events. And what at first we thought were 4 good ones, but as we started looking at them, we realized 2 of them happened with snow in the ground. That's the other thing the models don't do really well is tell you what happens when there's already snow on the ground. So 2 3-year events. So all the work that we're doing presently is looking at Isaias, Ivan, that first non-tropical storm, Ida, Kyle, and help me out, Alex. What's the other one? That winter storm. Yeah. Oh, the 28th. Yeah. So you'll see this as we make our presentation, next presentation after this. So these are the rainfall events that we're using. We've got 6 of them. We're going to pick 3 of those to be our surrogates. Again, to keep control of the budget and to keep control of the timeline. Any questions about that? So this is completed work. It's been reviewed with the program committee as well as all the KISS members. You guys are seeing this last. So these are the storms that we're looking at as being most impactful. This is what the 537 planning will be around. These events that are on this side are color coded.
And Jim, just to reinforce that, once the solutions are identified, you're gonna run the model 24 years of it. It's gonna take 4 days to spit an answer out.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna talk to you about where we're going with this, but in the end, these surrogates are stand-ins to let us do the cheat sheet paper math. When it actually comes time when we think we've got a solution that works, we'll run it through the extended simulation to see how often we have overflows with those improvements in place. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is take the design storms, and we just read through this with the program with the engineering team today. Look at where the overflows are happening and how much is coming out. I think our next board meeting, we're going to present that information. I'm not positive, our September board meeting. We'll present to you what the results of that work would be. But we basically looked at if we had any of these storms today, what would it look like? The red circles you see is where the overflows happen. That's obviously not your system, that's somebody else's system. And give you an idea of what those overflows are gonna be. And then, because our planning horizon is 2050, what's it look like in 2050 when we add the 7.5 million gallons of flow on top of 32.5 million gallons of flow currently send to Clients Island? What's that look like when we have any of those rain events? Stay tuned. That'll be available for your review in a month. So what's next? So I just want to talk to the board about where we're going with this stuff now that we've got these tools. So you're going to use this tool to evaluate alternatives. How do you fix the problem that you've defined in 2021 and in 2050? These give you an idea of just quickly whiteboarding out what are some of the ideas. Where could we build tanks? Where could we increase capacity? Where could we pump? Where could we put new pump stations in? What are the different source reduction? In other words, I&I removal activities that we can do? And what are the different treatment schemes that involve things at Clients Island or taking advantage of the pre-treatment plant and using that to change things around? So we've got all these different variables. When you start, if you've had permutations in high school, you start doing each one of these, it's in the tens of thousands of permutations. It could be run way more than we have money or time to do. So our plan is to pick a short list and go through 2 screening pieces of this. The first is a preliminary screening where we're going to pick about 18 of these to bracket what we're looking at for those different techniques. And then use that to inform more detailed definition of solutions, probably go through another dozen at the final alternatives analysis. This is very similar to the process that we followed for the SCARP, where we ended up with the solution there. The preliminary screening is just going to look at total capital costs. It's probably going to be a plus or minus 50% cost accuracy. Once we get that, and we start looking at these finals, much tighter tolerances on cost accuracy. We'll also be looking at not just capital, but O&M, energy costs, carbon footprint, net present worth. We'll also start at that point looking at 3-year, 5-year, 10-year storm events. What do we want to do in terms of climate change? Do we think we've already seen all the impact of climate change in the 20 years of data we're looking at? Or do we want to consider that things might get more intense? And what we think is a 10-year event now becomes by the 2040s a 5-year event. And then sequence of construction for thinking about capital projects. So the preliminary screening of alternatives work starts in October, and that will run us until the end of the first quarter of next year. This final screening runs through 2023 and into early 2024. And then from that, at the end of that, there's a vetting process that you guys are included in, as well as all the other signatories of all the stuff we looked at. Which one do we want to put our bid in on, right? Everybody's going to raise their hand for which one they like. And we suspect that by March of 24, we're down to 3 good ones, right? One the city likes, one we like, and one everybody else likes, let's just say. And we're going to run a detailed analysis for those final 3. Those will get run through the full, at that point, 24 years of rainfall. We'll look at things like impact of bonding strategies, financial strategies. There's a whole institutional approach around the intermunicipal agreements. Make some decisions. In the end, pick a solution, right? You got to have a solution. And the goal is that by June of 2025, we've got an approval for doing that. That's our game plan moving forward. There's a lot of detail behind this. If you got any other questions, be happy to try to answer those now.
Any word questions? Well, a lot to digest. Sounds heading in the right direction. Aggressive.
Yeah, we've been trying to bring the bits, pieces of the solution together to you over time, just so it keeps fresh in your mind. And also it's so big. If we were to present everything that we're doing all at once, we'd be here for a day and a half. this is a nice 45-minute chunk of something that we're working on. We'll kind of keep doing that over time.
It does when we keep authorizing lots of money.
Yeah.
Spent on this stuff like this. So yes, please keep it up. Keep it informed. Thank you. That's a good presentation. All right, let's move on.
Okay.
All right, item number 6 on the agenda, monthly project updates, information items.
Yeah, so just taking a look at the report that you have, just highlight a couple things for the upcoming meeting on the 22nd of August. We put a hold on the suburban water division capping fees a couple months ago because we needed to do some policy review. We're just about done with that and hoping to bring that back to you at the next meeting along with the solution to adopt those fees. So we got some good help to update that. And then Chuck's going to be here next time to talk about the water main replacement program cycle 7 and 8, which is the design phase for the next future phases of water main replacements in Allentown. And besides that, that's what we have on the agenda for the next meeting. If there's any questions about the information items or any of the other projects on the list, that's all I have.
Okay, any questions? All right. Staff comments.
I have nothing additional today.
Mr. Solicitor, any comments?
No comments, thank you.
Thank you. Any public comments on any topics whatsoever?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Jane. All right, we have no executive session, so at this time we are adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.